Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, it is our season preview for the 2025 college football season. If you're used to all the best ball and DFS shows from me, well, that's okay. This one's going to be a little bit different. Don't worry, we're still going to have plenty of those once week 0 and week 1 come around. But here on this show, we're just going to talk college football. And we're going to talk about a lot of teams and hopefully get excited about this upcoming college football season. And we're going to do it in a way that's different from a lot of existing content that's out there. We're not just going to be reading off names and numbers from a spreadsheet. We're not going to be talking about, oh, Team X has this many returning starters. We're not going to be talking about, oh, this team's coach says they're really going to establish the run this year. No, it's going to be two guys. They're just going to be talking ball. We're going to be talking about win totals and champions for futures bets for each conference. So if you want to tail us on any of these bets, feel free to. But we're going to be using those win totals and conference champions as a way to get to talk about each conference in the great nation of college football. And I have got a guest joining me here today. He was very well received from the bracket show that he joined me with back in March for college basketball. But I can tell you, the man knows college football just as well as he knows college basketball. Dad, I know you are not a gambling man, but I cannot remember how many times last year you texted me and were like, hey, I would put money on this team at this spread. And like almost every time you were right. So, Dad, how do you feel about your grasp heading into this college football season?
I feel pretty good. I think I got a pretty good handle on things.
So last year was the first year of the 12-team college football playoff, right? And I hyped it up from before the season as it being the biggest college football season of all time. And I think it delivered. I personally really enjoyed the 12-team playoff. Did you feel like the 12-team playoff was a success in year one?
Oh, yeah. I loved it. I've been waiting for something like this for, 40 plus years. So yeah, I thought it delivered.
Yeah. Cause I mean, you're not to be mean, but you're a little on the older side of me. I don't remember life before the BCS. You remember life when there wasn't even a national championship game. So now for there to be 12 teams battling out, it's just such a good improvement for the sport. The biggest thing I remember from, or will remember from last year's playoff was the home sites for the first round. Even though the games themselves were not great, you got it to be like 4 blue blood programs hosting playoff games, and just the crowd reactions and the crowd pops from some of those big plays, like Jeremiah Love's 98-yard run, or Jaden Blue breaking through the Clemson secondary, or Penn State's crowd every time Kevin Jennings couldn't hear the call. Like, just the crowd pops of those games was incredible. And I'm really looking forward to year 2 of the college football playoff, as it being 12 teams. All right, so now let's go ahead and dive into it. Like I said, we're going to take a look at each conference. We are going to give you a win total. We are going to give you a conference champion. Now, keep in mind, as we're advising betting on here, never bet what you can't afford to lose. And win totals are a particularly fickle market, because when we did this 2 years ago, I wish I had the stats in front of me, but we did the same show 2 years ago, Dad, and like more than half of our win totals came down to the last week of the regular season. Like, generally speaking, Vegas knows what they're doing with these win totals. And if you're looking to get rich off of win totals, it's a very hard job to do. All right, so let's go ahead and let's pull up the image that I made here. And we're going to start in the American Conference. So for your first win total, Dad, you have the Navy midshipman over 8.5. Care to elaborate on why you are so high on the midshipman this year?
Yeah, I had them going 10-2 when I looked at their schedule. They've got 12 starters back, including their uber athletic quarterback, Blake Horvath, and relatively favorable schedule. And they should be favored in 10 out of 12 games. And, just when I looked at it, they looked like a solid bet to hit 10 wins.
I am not opposed to that bet on Navy, honestly. Like, the American Athletic, or I guess just the American now, I got to stop saying athletic. The biggest thing I noticed was looking at some of their conference schedules. It's really imbalanced. Like, Navy and a team that we're going to talk about later, UTSA, really had some good draws of schedule. But at the meantime, some of the teams they're projecting near the bottom of the league, like Charlotte, for instance, just have absolutely brutal schedules. And one of them that I think has a pretty brutal schedule is Tulane. I'm going to go for my win total for the American, Tulane under 8.5 games. Now, granted, I typed this out before they added Jake Retzlaff, but I am going to stand by that win total, even though they've added Jake Retzlaff. Basically, I really highly doubt that he's going to get a full grasp of a full college offense just in a month's preparation. And so even if Retzlaff is their starter, I think it's going to be really difficult for him to come in and be effective at the level he was at last year. But other than that, I really think this team is going to take a big step back. You know, Tulane's got a pretty tough non-conference schedule. They played Northwestern, South Alabama, Duke, and Ole Miss. Those are 4 losable games. Like, I think Northwestern's going to be improved. South Alabama is no slouch. And Duke and Ole Miss, they're games that they're probably going to lose. And so I just really think that Tulane, you know, they've been one of the better group of 5 teams over the last 5 years, but I really think they take a big old step back this year. So now let's go ahead and talk about conference champions. So, Dad, you are really doubling down on Navy here. You've got Navy as your American Athletic Conference champion.
Yeah, again, just a lot of starters coming back. You know, Blake Horvath, the quarterback, which is key to their success in the triple option, is back. And not only is he a great triple option quarterback, but he can actually throw the ball decently. They're a good football team. They almost won it last year, so I think they've got a good team.
I think you could really make the argument. Horvath's probably their best quarterback since Keenan Reynolds, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, he's really solid. And if you haven't watched Navy play, you should. Like, I love watching the triple option football, and Navy's kind of found some inventive and creative ways to bring it in the 21st century. They're a really tough play, and so I don't mind that pick. I'm going somewhere different, though. For my conference champion in the American, I am going with the UTSA Roadrunners. You can find them at about 4-1 on most sports books to win. They are one of the few teams in the nation that returns all 11 starters on offense, from quarterback to the entire receiving room, the entire offensive line, and their running back. That is not very common, right? And so you know they're going to be able to put up a lot of points. Defense is going to be a question mark, as it usually is for them. But that offensive continuity is going to allow them to win some games. And last year, they were one of the most penalized teams in the nation. You got to feel like with them being an experienced group, they're going to shore some of that up. They've got a difficult non-conference schedule, but their conference schedule, they only play 3 remotely tough games, Tulane, Army, and USF. So I really think that UTSA's got a really good walk to that conference championship game, and I think if they get there, I really think they're going to win. All right, so now that was our first G5 conference. Now let's dive into the Power Four. This one's going to get a little more spicy. So we're talking about the ACC, which actually, based off of where we are at geographically, is kind of the closest conference to us. So in this one, we share a conference champion, but I believe we both have different win totals, and we're both eyeing a different team to play in the conference champions. So Dad, walk me through your win total here for the ACC.
Okay, I've got SMU over on the 8.5. I have them winning 10 games. They should be favored in 9 out of 12 games, and 2 of the games that their underdogs are going to be very tight point spreads. Baylor and TCU, probably no more than 3, if not tighter than that. So I see them winning one of those games and probably losing to Clemson. And I think Clemson was the one. Yeah, at Clemson, and that would put him at 10-2.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that with SMU. I think that there's really some revisionist history on last season when it comes to Clemson. I think that the last 2 games really made people think that Clemson is a lot better than they actually are. The fact that they did pull through against SMU, the fact that they did kind of hang with Texas for 3 quarters, but SMU was like, they were legitimately good last year. They were really close to beating Clemson in that ACC championship game. And in fact, I really think that a few plays broke differently in the college football playoff game, they might have been able to hang with Penn State. I really do think that that's a good look for SMU. I am not going to doubt that they could redo what they did last year, but I'm going to go a different direction for my win total. I have got the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets over 7.5 games. I really like this Georgia Tech team. They return Haynes King at quarterback and Jamal Haynes at running back, and they return a lot of their O-line. And last year, their season was really affected by injuries, including their quarterback, Haynes King, and they still got to 7 wins. This year, they dropped Notre Dame from the schedule. They add Colorado, and I kind of have an early lean on picking them to beat Colorado in week 1. And so if they just do what they did last year with that one swap, that would get them to 8 games. But I'm really a believer in this team. I think they can get all the way to the ACC championship game. Obviously, they're probably going to lose a non-conference game to Georgia, but I think they could very easily find themselves in the ACC championship game. It's a team with a really good offensive line, really good run game, experienced quarterback. Dad, what do you think about the Yellow Jackets heading into 2025?
I've got them going 8-4. I think they could easily do better than could certainly go the 9-3 that you're projecting. They're a solid team. They're going to probably be favored in 7 of 12 games. The ones they're not favored in, the point spreads are going to be pretty close. Colorado, they'll be a slight underdog. I mean, they may be a slight underdog at Duke and a slight underdog at Pitt, but again, those are actually Pitt's at home. So, those are winnable games. So it wouldn't shock me at all if they even got as high as 9-3. I have them going 8-4, but
one thing I have learned over the years of watching college football is back teams with good offensive line and good offensive line coaches. And I believe that Georgia Tech has that. And I believe that's going to be one of the things that's able to carry them to the ACC championship game this season. But as Lee Corso would say, not so fast, my friend, because both of us have a different team as the conference champion. We both have Clemson as the ACC champ. So I got to admit, I was a little bit lukewarm on making this pick, and I'll explain why. But, Dad, tell me why you had Clemson as your ACC champion.
I just think they're better than any of the other teams. The ACC championship game is always in Charlotte, which is a fan-friendly. It's an hour and a half drive from Clemson. So, it's going to be 80% Clemson fans no matter who they play. I think it's going to be SMU again. It could easily be Georgia Tech or somebody else, but I will say this: I'm not sipping the Clemson Kool-Aid that everybody else is sipping. I've seen people rank them as high as 1, and I've got them at 11. They're a decent team, but they're not going to be in the Final Four. I don't think they've improved that much. They got manhandled by Louisville last year, and that Texas game was much closer. Was not as close as the score would indicate.
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't. I think they're the class of the ACC, but they're not on that top tier level that a lot of people think they are.
I think that's a very solid conclusion. That's about the same place I'm at with Clemson. Is you look at them last year. Even in a quote-unquote down year, they still won the ACC. They return a lot of that team, including their quarterback and his top 3 receivers. But to me, the bottom line with Clemson is you can pick them to win the ACC and still not think they're a contender to win a national championship, which is where I'm at with them. I think you watch what happened with them when they played SEC competition last year. Georgia, South Carolina, and Texas, they just got bullied on the line of scrimmage, and I don't think that's going to change. I think the SEC teams are just a little bigger and stronger than them up front, and even though, I think they're good, I think they're the class of the ACC, I still doubt a little bit their ability to contend at a national championship level.
I think their opener against LSU is going to tell us a lot.
I agree, but here's the thing, though,
I think they'll win, but not by much. But I think
I agree. I have them, and we'll talk about this later. I have them beating LSU in that game, which is a big domino for predicting the whole CFP. But I think LSU is a good matchup for them in terms of LSU is not going to try to bully you up front the way that a Georgia or a Texas or even an Alabama will. Like they're just not that same type of team.
Yeah, they're going to have trouble playing with any of the big boys in the SEC or Big Ten or Notre Dame that are going to ram it down your throat.
Yeah, I think Notre Dame would be a terrible.
They're not built to play with those type of teams. Fortunately for them, LSU is a finesse team that wants to throw it all over the yard, and that's not a bad matchup for them.
And LSU not as good defensively as all the other teams we just mentioned either.
True.
Word noted. All right, so now let's transition on over to a little bit to the Big Ten. This one I think could get a little bit interesting because we're different all over the place. So I will start because I have been waffling on this. So when I first did my research for this a few weeks ago, the win total that I identified was Illinois over 8.5. But since then, I've listened to a ton of content. I've read a ton of articles, and everybody is picking Illinois. And that has me concerned because when does the trendy team that everybody picks, when does that ever work out? I can't think of one, honestly.
Yeah, I think
thinking. Go ahead.
I think everyone thinks Illinois is going to be the Indiana of last year.
Yes.
When I went through my exercise, I've got them going 9-3, which would put them over. But it's not the playoff team that some people are picking.
I mean, the schedule is real nice. I think that they can still go over the 8.5 and not be a playoff team. Like we're saying, in non-conference they don't play anybody all that good. In the conference, they really only play Ohio State and Indiana are their two toughest games. So if they lose those two, they could still very easily go 10-2, 9-3, and still hit your over and not be as good as everybody thought. But since researching, though, there's another Big Ten team that I'm higher on that they're going to come back up when we talk about the college football playoff later that I'm going to make sure we talk about. But, Dad, looking at what we've got here, your win total for the Big Ten involves the Michigan Wolverines. Where are you going on that one?
Yeah, I think they're going to go at least 10-2. They're a lot better team than people. Last year, that actually, if you look at the Sagarin ratings, which is the closest thing college football has to KenPom, they were the number 12 team in the country, and they got zero quarterback play last year. And they played everybody tough that they played. They beat Ohio. They beat Ohio State. They held that vaunted Ohio State offense to 10 points. Now they lost some players, but they're going to be a very talented team, and they've actually got a very favorable schedule. They're going to be favored in every game, but the one at Oklahoma, which is probably going to be about a pick 'em, and Ohio State at home. They win that game at Ohio State, they could be undefeated going into that Michigan show, going into that Ohio State showdown. So,
boy, that would be something.
We'll just see if Bryce Underwood lives up to the hype, or Mikey Keene steps in and gives them effective play at quarterback. I think they're going to be in the mix.
I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that they had the worst quarterback play out of the entire Power Four last year. And they still got to a bowl game. They still beat Ohio State, the national champion, and they still beat Alabama in the bowl. It's a team with a lot of talent, a team that has a lot of things that they do the right way. They're going to be very good defensively. And, Bryce Underwood doesn't even need to live up to the hype. He just needs to be adequate, and they could very well go over that 8.5 total. So yeah. I'm with you on that with Michigan. But like I said, I'm teasing it. You guys got to stick around till the end. There's another Big Ten team that I'm really high on that we're going to talk about when we talk about the CFP. Now, this is where I think we have a little bit of disagreement. If you guys think that we agree too much, well, now we've got some big-time disagreement. The Big Ten champs. We both have the same two teams playing in the game. We've got different winners. I am rolling with the Ohio State Buckeyes. You are rolling with the Penn State Nittany Lions. Dad, make the case for James Franklin and Penn State here on this one.
They were a top 4 team last year. They've got a lot. They've got 2 1,000-yard rushers, and their quarterback is back. The only real significant loss they had was Tyler Warren. They picked up Jim Knowles from Ohio State, as defensive coordinator. I think Ohio State gets them at home in November, but I think Penn State wins the rematch. Although there's a crazy scenario if Michigan stays in the mix, that Michigan and Ohio State could end up playing each other in the Big Ten championship game, and Penn State with one loss be out of that. But I think Penn State's going to be there. I can't stand them, but. After looking at what they were last year and what they've got back, I think it's their year.
Yeah, because I know you, as the resident Notre Dame fan last year, were all year saying, why is Penn State ranked ahead of Notre Dame? Why is Penn State ranked ahead of Notre Dame? And then they finally got to meet on the field, and Notre Dame pulled it out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I absolutely get where you're coming from
And
there.
honestly, that game, I had more respect for them after that game than I did before. They played Notre Dame much tougher than I thought they would.
Now, I will say there were some aspects of that game that were kind of suspect, though. Like the pass interference calls that went against Notre Dame really swung the momentum. The fact that Notre Dame's secondary held Penn State receivers without a catch, I thought that was really impressive on Notre Dame's part.
Yeah.
And I really think the way the momentum of the game was going, it felt like if they were going to play 5 or 6 quarters, that Notre Dame probably would have beaten them by 2 or 3 scores. But Penn State jumped on them early, and hence you get the close game there at the end. So anyway, I'm zigging where you're zagging. Ironically, I have the exact opposite scenario as you. I think Penn State beats Ohio State in the regular season, but I've got Ohio State coming back to beat them in the conference championship. So here's what I see with Ohio State. I see it being quite similar to last season in that they're going to lose twice in the regular season, but they're going to use that to figure everything out. It's what they did last year, and I think they're going to do it again this year. I think they're going to lose to Texas in week 1. I think they're going to, kind of gain momentum, gain experience, lose to Penn State in the middle of the year, and then kind of build towards a Big Ten championship, kind of have everything figured out, readjusted for the rematch, kind of like how last year, how when they had their rematch against Oregon, they demolished them. I just trust Ryan Day. I know they've got 2 new coordinators. I know they've got a new quarterback, but that is a roster that when they're replacing guys from last year's team, they're just backfilling it with more 4 and 5 stars that are going to go on to the NFL someday. So I really think that kind of the formula for last year is the formula for this year for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, certainly. That certainly could happen. And there's certainly a team that'll be better at the end of the year than they are at the beginning.
I am thankful as a Texas fan that Texas is playing them week 1. I think that's the most vulnerable time for them, working in a brand new quarterback, 2 brand new coordinators. Even though the game's at Ohio State, I certainly think that that's when you want to play them as opposed to the end of the season.
Yeah.
All right. So now very quickly. I'm sorry. We got another big one. My bad. And then we're going to do the one quickly. So now we got to talk about the Big 12, the Conference of Chaos, the Big 12. So this is a conference where truly I could see it going 500 different directions. But one thing that I see consistently is this. I have Oklahoma State going under 5.5 games. I just don't see it with this team at all. They're returning 0 starting offensive skill players. Their non-conference schedule is not easy. They play Oregon, and they're only likely to be favored in 4 of their games on that schedule, meaning you're going to need them to pull off some upsets. And I think that the Mike Gundy era is probably coming to an end in Stillwater. The whole "I'm a man, I'm 40" speech is about 20 years old. If he did it this year, it'd be "I'm a man, I'm 60." And I think that this team just doesn't have a whole lot of talent. Brutal schedule. I just don't see them getting to bowl eligibility. Now, for your win total, Dad, you kind of doubled down on one particular team. Who are you rocking with in the Big 12?
I'm rocking with Arizona State. That I was shocked when I saw that 8.5 win total. I've got them going 11-1. They were the biggest difference of any team I looked at in terms of their projected win total and the over-under. They should be favored in at least 11 of their games, if not all of them. They've got 17 starters back, including their quarterback, Sam Leavitt. And, that was a really good football team at the end of the year. They gave Texas everything they could handle in the Cotton Bowl. I think they're a legit national championship contender this year.
Yeah, so the one thing everybody who doubts Arizona State is going to point to is they're going to say, they lose Cam Skattebo. He was the heart and soul of the team. Well, yeah, but they have a young up-and-coming head coach who wants to be there, wants to build something. They have a quarterback who is now experienced and can make plays, and they have a wide receiver 1 in Jordan Tyson that they didn't even have in that game against Texas because he was out for the season. So I really think that this is a team who's going to be the class of the Big 12. Now, I have them winning the conference championship as well. You can find that at around 6-1 at most sports books. Really, the Big 12, like, it's so chaotic. The last time I checked, there was no team that was under 5-1 in terms of their odds, which is crazy because most of the ones that we're looking at are like coin flips, right? Now, the one thing I will say, the one team I will tell you guys to watch out for is I think Texas Tech is going to make some noise this year. They spent a lot of money in the transfer portal. They return a lot on offense. And I just think that they're taking the next steps to be a true contender in the Big 12. They've got that oil NIL money, right? So, like, I literally, when you hear about Texas Tech's NIL money, I'm just picturing like a great value Jerry Jones, just like spending this money to make Texas Tech relevant. So I would say if I were to pick any team to play them in that game, it would be Texas Tech. And I also think the weird thing about the Big 12 is a lot of the conference is going to be played out. Well, I wouldn't say a lot, but like the week 0 game between Kansas State and Iowa State is a largely relevant game. And it's going to happen before every team in America even plays. I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, I think if you look at that league after Arizona State, there's like 7 teams that are maybe within 3 points of each other on a neutral field.
Mm-hmm.
I think Baylor's one that people may not be talking about. That I've got.
I like
them.
Baylor too.
I've got them in the championship game. They had a very quietly had a good season, finished strong last year, and they've got a lot of people back. So I think I see them maybe going 9-3 and 6-2 in conference and playing Arizona State in the final of that, in the championship. But they're although there's like 7 teams, though, they're all kind of in a bunch, and it could go any way.
Yeah, I like your Baylor call. Like, I would tend to like pick a team that can win shootouts because in the Big 12, you're just going to have to win shootouts. And Baylor is a team with Sawyer Robertson and Bryson Washington coming back that they're going to be able to win some shootouts because they're going to score a lot of points. Unfortunately, I don't know how many stops they're going to get on defense, but their offense is going to be good enough to kind of back it. All right, so now, like I said, this is the one we're going to go through quick. We were in agreement on both of them. Conference USA, arguably the worst conference in all of FBS football. For the win total, we both had Delaware over 4.5 games. Delaware is the newest FBS team, along with Missouri State this season. They were an FCS powerhouse, and we have seen FCS powerhouses like move up to the FBS, especially these weaker conferences, and have success early. And Delaware's got a really easy schedule. I think that they're going to transition quite easily. We both have them over 4.5 games. And then we both have Liberty as the conference champion. So last year, when you look at advanced metrics like Sagarin, like SP Plus of Bill Connolly at ESPN, Liberty was the actual best team in the league. They just laid a few eggs. They have an incredibly weak schedule this year, arguably the worst in all the FBS, and they are bringing in a new quarterback this year, Ethan Vasco, who's a great fit for the Jamie Chadwell offense. So Liberty just looks like the class of that league to both of us. All right, now back to probably my favorite group of 5 conference to talk about. We got to talk about some action. So we were both in agreement here on this win total that we both have the Buffalo Bulls going over 7.5 games. Can you elaborate on what makes Buffalo a good target for over 7.5?
Yeah, they've got 14 starters back from an 8-4 team last year. Relatively soft non-conference schedule. The only losable non-conference game is Minnesota, and it wouldn't shock me if they upset Minnesota.
Agreed.
So, said they go 3-1 in conference. All they've got to do is go 5-3 in the MAC to go 8-4. So, I think they're easily going to more than likely are going to win 9 games.
I'm with you. When you look at the MAC schedule, you think about the class of that league, along with Buffalo, it's Toledo, Ohio, and Miami. And Buffalo doesn't play Toledo on the schedule, and they get Ohio and Miami, Ohio at home. And so I think that's a very favorable MAC schedule. They are breaking in a new quarterback this year. I believe he's a transfer from Kansas State, if my memory serves me. And they do have a dynamic running back in Aljay Henderson. Very good fantasy play, Aljay Henderson is. So I do like Buffalo going over 7.5 as well. However, this is one where we have different conference champions because, Dad, you are riding with Buffalo to win the conference. Who did you have Buffalo playing in the conference championship game?
Actually, Toledo.
Great segue, because I have Toledo as the winner of the MAC. So they actually lead the conference in returning production, and they were pretty good last year. And they brought in some good transfers to backfill. They got former Ohio State and Kentucky running back Chip Trainum. They got former Northern Illinois receiver Trayvon Rudolph at wide receiver. This team's got talent. They're returning their quarterback, they're returning their head coach, and in the MAC, that goes a long way. And so I've got Toledo as the conference champion. But as is with the MAC, crazy things can happen. And if you want to know what's going to happen in this conference, you better be tuning in on Tuesday nights in November, because it's matching is something else.
Yeah.
All right, so let's carry on to the next one, the Mountain West. So we both have the same conference champion. Some of you guys probably know where that's going, but we both had different win totals. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you had the team that you picked for your win total, you also had in the conference championship game, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so we're in agreement on that. So you have the UNLV Rebels going over 8.5 and making it to the Mountain West championship game. Care to elaborate on UNLV?
Yeah, it's in my notes here. I'm putting a lot of faith in Dan Mullen, who I think was always an underrated coach. Did well everywhere he'd been. Kind of was unfairly run off in Florida, but they were a solid team last year. I think they won 9 games last year, and have a fair amount of talent coming back. But I think they'll be in the mix again. Their non-conference. I think their non-conference schedule is not overly daunting. I think the toughest game is UCLA, and it's at home. And UCLA is a bottom tier Big Ten team. That's a totally
UCLA is kind of a dumpster fire.
Yeah, so I mean, you go 4-0 non-conference. All you got to do is go 5-3 in the Mountain West, and you're 9-3. So I think it's a good pick on that one.
I don't mind that. I am going another direction, though. I'm rocking with the San Jose State Spartans over 7.5. Basically, a lot of what you said about UNLV, just ditto for San Jose State. They've got a proven head coach in Ken Niumatalolo. They're returning a lot, including their quarterback and their running back, most of their offensive line, most of their defense. And they really dodge a bullet with how easy their Mountain West schedule is. They don't play Boise. They don't play UNLV. And those are really the only other 2 teams in the Mountain West that I'm really all that concerned about. So they could very easily go undefeated in Mountain West schedule because I think they're better than all the Mountain West teams that are on their schedule. They're going to be huge underdogs in their game against Texas, but really even the other non-conference games are winnable. So I think with San Jose State, that over 7.5, you're getting a lot of mulligans where if they come out and do what I expect them to do, they're going to be favored in a lot more games than that 7.5. But at the end of the day, we both, as much as we like San Jose State and UNLV respectively, we both are not picking them to win the conference championship. We have the same conference champion. So, Dad, tell me why you think Boise State is going to repeat in the Mountain West.
I just think they're the class of that league. They've got P5 level talent. They gave a decent account of themselves once they got in the playoff. Penn State beat them, but they were competitive. They certainly gave Oregon all they could handle early in the year. I think they'll have their hands full when they go to Notre Dame, but other than that, I just think they're the class of that league, and they're probably a touchdown better than anybody else in and on a neutral field.
So I'm going to talk more about their playoff chances a little later. But I think, like you said, they're the class of that conference. They're the best recruiting team in that conference. They get the best portal players in that conference. They just have the best roster top to bottom. And it's just hard to see anybody in that league showing up and beating them on a neutral field when it matters. I do think that they're going to be a step back from last year. Obviously they're losing Aston Genty, who we all love. And they do have a tougher non-conference schedule than last year. But I do think that they're still the class of the league when all's said and done. But like I said, we're going to talk more about their playoff chances here in a second. So really quickly, we're going to go through the Sun Belt. So me and you were on the same wavelength on this one as well. So basically, if you're not aware, The former head coach at Marshall, Charles Huff, packed up his toys and left and went to Southern Miss, and he brought all of his players with him. So Marshall's roster was decimated. Southern Miss's roster is now infused with all these Marshall players. And so it's kind of a combo you can go with for the win totals. You could take Southern Miss over 4.5. You can take Marshall under 4.5. And the Sun Belt, the only conference in the FBS that still does divisions, the East side is a lot more difficult than the West. And so both of us have our conference champion coming out of the West, Louisiana, because it's just a lot easier to see them getting to the game out of the West than the East, because the East is kind of a bloodbath between a lot of teams that are quite even. Louisiana this year is adding Walker Howard, who, believe it or not, is the quarterback that you remember the famous Brian Kelly dancing meme, Dad?
Oh, yeah.
Walker Howard is the quarterback that was standing with Brian Kelly in that meme as it happened.
Interesting.
I believe he started at Ole Miss and now is at Louisiana, and is probably going to be leading them to the Sun Belt Championship this year. We're both rolling with the Raging Cajuns. All right, now let's talk about the best conference in college football. Actually, let's elaborate on that first. The best conference in college football, Dad, SEC or Big Ten?
I'm going to say SEC this year.
Mm-hmm.
The past 2 years, I think it's been the Big Ten, but I think I've got, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got 5 SEC teams in the playoff this year.
Mm-hmm.
And
so
I've only got 3 Big Ten. So
the thing that I think separates the SEC from the Big Ten, at least this year, and I would say last year as well, is the mid and bottom of the SEC are good enough to jump up and get you. You know, like we saw last year, Vanderbilt beat Alabama. We saw Arkansas beat Tennessee. We saw, I can picture it. I can't think right now, though. Somebody beat Texas A&M. Auburn beat Texas A&M. And so you just didn't really see that in the Big Ten. You know, the top teams in the Big Ten were able to really separate themselves last year. And so I think that makes the SEC a much tougher conference top to bottom and makes it the best league in all of college football. However, the best league has to have a worse team. And so for my win total, I am going Kentucky under 4.5 games. I think this team is just absolutely a dumpster fire. You know that they have the non-conference game to Louisville. And so if they lose that game to Louisville, which I think they will, they would need to win 2 conference games to make it to 4.5. And given that their conference schedule is Georgia, Texas, South Carolina, Tennessee, Florida, Ole Miss, Auburn, and Vanderbilt, I just don't see that happening. Like, maybe you can make an argument that they beat Vanderbilt, but I don't even see that. Their quarterback this year is going to be Zach Calzada of former Texas A&M, beat Alabama one time, had his one shining moment like 7 years ago fame. We've seen him in the SEC on a big sample size. Did not work out. So I really just don't think that this roster is very talented. I don't think they're going to have great quarterback play. I think that they are very clearly the bottom dweller in the SEC. Now, Dad, for your win total, you've got a team that was the bottom dweller a few years ago, and now you've got them on the come up. Tell me about the Florida Gators.
They've got 14 starters coming back, including DJ Lagway, and they were a better team than you thought, than you would have thought on the surface, or than their record indicated. When I looked at their Sagarin ratings last year, and with the guys they got coming, back, I think they're going to be really solid. They're probably only going to be favored in 7 of their games, but the ones that they're not favored in, most of them are going to be like 3-point spreads or less. So I've got them winning. I think I've got them going 9-3. So I think that's again, when I did that, when I did my projected wins and I looked at the win totals and the over, my projection relative to the over unders, there were only a few of them where I wasn't a half a game from the projection. So this was one of them. So I think they'll do pretty well. I mean, I think, like I said, 9-3, which with their schedule would be a good accomplishment.
So a great stat that I heard from, I want to get this right, it's called the Solid Verbal College Football Podcast. They had a stat that every game that DJ Lagway started and finished last year, Florida won. That's quite incredible. Now, granted, he got knocked out of the Georgia game. They weren't going to win that one if he finished it. Let's be honest. But they were very good when Lagway was healthy. He made some freshman mistakes, but he's got all the arm talent in the world. He's got all the talent in the world around him. I do think Florida is a team that can take that step up this year and be pesky in the SEC and get over that. I'm in agreement with you there on the Gators. Now, go ahead.
No, I didn't.
Okay, I thought you were going to add something. So we are in disagreement over the conference champion. So I'm a homer. Texas is my team. I've got the Texas Longhorns, and I think they're going to be the best team in college football. Now, granted, I'm biased. I know. Sue me. But they really, the things that people want to knock Texas for, they've done a very good job of actually like filling in the gaps. Like everybody's going to point out with Texas that they return only 2 starting offensive linemen. Well, yeah, that's true, but most of their starting offensive line was hurt last year, and the guys that are now starting played a lot of snaps last year, especially in like blowout lopsided games, of which they had a lot of them last year. And people are also going to detract and point out that they are losing their 2 defensive tackles from last year. That's accurate, but they also went out in the portal and got 2 good ones with starting experience to start at defensive tackle. They're losing Gunnar Helm on offense. Well, guess what? They went and got a quality starting tight end, Jack Andrews from Cal. Sark did a very good job of taking a look at what his team had on the roster, what his team was losing, and made strategic portal additions, or he's just done such a good job recruiting that the guys that are coming up are 4 and 5 stars and are going to be 1st and 2nd round draft picks. And then, oh, by the way, I haven't even mentioned yet, they got Arch Manning at quarterback, who is the most hyped quarterback prospect probably of the last 20 years. And I don't even know if he has to be that good. If he's just Quinn Ewers good, this is a team that probably should have won the SEC last year. They probably should have beaten Georgia in that conference championship game in Atlanta. But anyway, I digress. I know I'm a little biased. Tell me who you think is going to win the SEC.
I've got Georgia. I think they were better than people gave them credit for last year. That schedule was just insanely tough and loaded with just death trap road games. All of those death trap road games have flipped and
are now at
home.
Now
going to be in Athens, where Georgia just does. They don't lose in Athens. They just don't. So I see them getting Bama. I see them getting Texas and Athens, and just like Saban had Kirby's number, Kirby's had Sark's number so far. So
accurate.
That's kind of where that's coming from.
But eventually Kirby got one on Saban.
He got one. He eventually got one. It may be Sark may get one this year, but I think people are sleeping on the dogs, and they may be. I think they're going to be right in the mix for the national championship.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. I do think Georgia is going to make it to the SEC championship game. I think that the elements of that game being a rematch are quite interesting because it was the same case last year where it was a rematch, but then Carson Beck gets hurt and Texas all of a sudden is defending Gunnar Stockton, who they did not prepare for. It just kind of threw a curveball and everything, right? I do think that those 2 teams is kind of a chess match, right? I think that they're definitely the class of the league, though. I don't think that Alabama or A&M or LSU or anybody else is in the class of those 2. So I would be shocked if it wasn't Texas or Georgia. And I also think everybody for last year loved to jump on Carson Beck for Georgia and criticize his play. But honestly, it was the offensive line that was killing them.
Yeah.
And they're now healthy. They have some returners. They have some new guys. They're all talented. And I think that if the offensive line play for Georgia improves to where we saw it in 21 and 22, that's a team that can win the SEC and can win the national championship.
Yeah, and I think Gunnar Stockton's more of a Stetson Bennett type quarterback, which seems to fit into what Georgia likes to do, and when they're clicking offensively.
Yeah, I think that judging him based off what we saw from him last year would be just straight up unfair because let's be honest, Texas and Notre Dame were probably the 2 best defense, if not 2 of the top 5 defenses in all of college football. And no quarterbacks looked good against those 2 defenses. So, anyway, I forgot to make the graphic for this page, but we did want to offer up some Heisman picks. So we're both going to give a front runner, and then I have a long shot. So the one front runner I have for the Heisman, I'm just going to leave the SEC slide up because he does play in the SEC. It's Lenoris Sellers of South Carolina. So basically, when you think about the Heisman Trophy, what typically wins the Heisman Trophy is a quarterback on a team that is having a Cinderella season, or you get a quarterback that's just putting up insane numbers, and them winning 8 or 9 games is okay, right? Like you think about RG3, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Johnny Manziel, right? Like that type of season where the numbers are just insane, that they're going 9-3 and it's still okay to give them the Heisman. I think Lenoris Sellers can have one of those seasons. He is a dual threat. He has all the arm talent in the world, and he has a way of making things happen with his legs. Also, I was very impressed with him down the stretch last season. He really finished the season strong. Really had South Carolina playing some great football down the stretch of last year. I think he's a very solid pick to win the Heisman, and you can get him at about 20-1 odds right now. Dad, are you in on Lenoris Sellers, or do you have somebody else in mind?
I'm just concerned South Carolina's season's not going to live up to expectations from a win-loss standpoint. Whether it's his fault or not, just the schedule, and that would be my concern. I've actually got Jeremiah Smith. I think he's the best college football player. Now that doesn't always win the Heisman, but I mean, Ohio State plays in the national spotlight on big TV games almost every week, and if he puts up big numbers and some has some of those Heisman moments, I think he's got a chance to win it.
Yeah, so like you think back to last year, and there really wasn't a quarterback that went out and grabbed the award, and that was how you ended up with Travis Hunter winning it. Obviously, Travis Hunter, two-way player, but I do think that Jeremiah Smith, probably a better receiver than Travis Hunter was.
Oh, yeah.
So I could absolutely see Jeremiah Smith going up and win the Heisman. Now, I've got a true long shot pick. This guy, you can be found at 65-1 at most sports books. Damon Williams Jr., Washington's new quarterback, was absolutely electric in the bowl game against Louisville. Over 400 yards of total offense. Washington has a fairly easy Big Ten schedule, so they might be able to get to that win threshold where if he's putting up insane numbers, you could get some Heisman potential from him. But I just think you look at a guy that just could absolutely be electric with the football in his hands, have a few Heisman moments, put up some great numbers. He's a guy that I think could do that.
Yeah, I think that's a good value bet. A lot of people are high on Washington to make some noise in the Big Ten this year.
I think they could. I really do. Now, we teased it earlier. Let's talk about the 12 college football playoff teams. So the way we'll do this is we'll kind of talk about who we have in common, and then we'll kind of weigh our differences. Okay. So we both have in common Texas, no surprise. Ohio State, no surprise. Notre Dame, no surprise. I'll be honest. I actually think Notre Dame is probably the best value bet if you were to go to a sports book and make a bet on a single team to make the college football playoff. Because what the committee showed us last year was that an 11-1 Notre Dame, no matter how weak their schedule ends up being, no matter how bad their loss ends up being, an 11-1 Notre Dame is getting in the playoff. And I think it's more likely than not that they end up going 11-1 or 12-0 with that schedule. Dad, what do you think about your Irish?
Yeah, they're going to be favored in every game they play, and probably every game but the Miami game, they're going to be favored by double digits. So
the Texas A&M game might be closer.
It might be. I'm thinking it's going to be like 9 or 10.
Mm-hmm. I don't see Texas A&M beating them though. Texas A&M is very limited offensively with Marcel Reed, and I don't think that you can beat that Notre Dame Marcus Freeman defense with being limited offensively.
If they stub their toe against Miami, breaking in a new quarterback, they've got 2 weeks to recover, and they're going to be loaded for bear come that second game against Texas A&M. So I think worst case they split those 2 games. I don't think anybody else beats them, and they're 11-1, 3, 4, or 5 seed in the playoff.
Mm-hmm.
If they get by Miami, who knows? They might run the table.
Yeah, I think that's a real possibility. And we mentioned it earlier. They have the game against Boise. Going to mention that here in a little bit because that's going to come back up. So we're in agreement on Notre Dame. We're in agreement on Georgia also. We're in agreement on Clemson as champs of the ACC. We're in agreement on Penn State as well. Now, this is the last team that we are in agreement on. Oh, no, I'm sorry. We agreed on Arizona State, the winners of the Big 12. The last team we're in agreement on is Alabama. So the one thing I will say about this is I don't think I'm as high on Alabama as like a lot of the national media is. Like the thing I keep telling myself is like, hey, Nick Saban ain't walking through that door. Like they're not as talented, as well coached, as deep as the Alabama teams of old. But when you start looking at schedules, right, and you start looking at like multiple team schedules, there becomes some permutations where like it's really difficult to put multiple teams like from the same conference in. Like Alabama, South Carolina, LSU all play each other, right? And there's just the SEC schedules, really there's a ton of overlap. And so when you start actually assigning wins and losses, I still think Alabama is going to be able to get to 10-2 and get in the college football playoff, because last year we pretty much saw that 10-2 is going to get you in the SEC or the Big Ten, right? 9-3 is probably not likely, but I still think that Alabama, even though I'm not picking them to go undefeated, I'm not picking them to win the national championship, I still think it's likely they get to 10-2.
You know, I was not high on them at all until I started doing my research, and then looking at where they were last year, you know, in terms of like Sagarin rating, what they had coming back, and then looking at their schedule, you know, I was like, oh my God, they could go 11-1. You know, they could win every game on that schedule except that trip to Athens. And you know, say they go 11-1 and they're tied with Texas and Georgia. You know, they end up being the 11-1 team that doesn't have to play in the SEC final game. You know, they're sitting pretty at a 4 or 5 seed. But they were one that surprised me. I really didn't think I thought they might be in the mix, but they came out much stronger when I did the research than I thought they would.
Right. And so kind of tying in with that, the next team I had that we both differ. We both have another SEC team in, right? So I had South Carolina. You had Florida. I already mentioned, I think Lenore Sellers is really good. I think South Carolina finished the season really strong. And I think that, again, the magic number is 10-2. And if you're South Carolina and you lose to Alabama and even LSU, but you come back and you beat Clemson on the last day of the regular season, I think that's enough to get them in the playoff. And I know that, you know, there's a lot of kind of closer to 50-50 games on that schedule than maybe like a Texas or a Georgia, but I just think that 10-2 being that magic number, I see them getting there. You, on the other hand, are really rocking with Florida.
Yeah, another one, and just, you know, full disclosure, I'm not a Florida fan. I don't like Florida. And ironically, I have them getting in at 9-3.
Interesting.
And we'll see what happens, though. You know, when I look at it, there's some. It would require them to bump a couple 10-2 teams. So we'll see exactly kind of where that goes. But you know, they've got a monster schedule, and
with that schedule, they could get 9-3 and get in. Yeah,
that's kind of where I'm at. I think they'll
Florida,
go 9-3. They'll surprise somebody that, you know, that they could potentially, you know, shock a Texas or a Georgia. You know, they're at home against Texas. They've got Georgia on a neutral field. You know, and not 9-3 with one of those two games in their pocket, I think they get in.
I really think Florida and LSU are probably the two teams that you can feel pretty comfortable about getting in at 9-3 because of the difficulty of the schedule.
Yeah, I think it'll happen this year. I think they'll probably be a little bit of a switch reaction, you know, in terms of, you know, they won't get it. You know, the 9-3 is not going to get in over an 11-1 like in Indiana was last year, or like, you know, SMU was before they played in their conference championship game. But if a 9-3 and a 9-3 versus a 10-2, I can certainly see the 9-3 with the stronger schedule being the team that gets the nod. Like, for instance, Oregon may go 10-2 this year and not beat anybody. Whereas Florida's 9-3 and they've got a top 10 win and 2 or 3 top 25 wins in their pocket. I could definitely see that, that scenario where they go with a Florida over an Oregon.
So now we each have an additional Big Ten team in. So we both had Ohio State and Penn State. We both have a third one in. You're rolling with Michigan.
Yeah, like I said, if you look at their schedule, they've kind of got like the Indiana schedule last year, although they do have to go to USC, and that might be the one that knocks them out. But they could potentially run the table in the Big Ten going into that Ohio State game, or be no worse than 9-2 heading into that game.
So
if they get by Oklahoma, I think they're going to be
key.
They're going to be they're going to be a team to talk about, and I feel like they will. I'm not sipping the Oklahoma Kool-Aid.
I'm not either.
A lot of other people were, and when I did the research, they didn't come out. They didn't come out all that high. I'm trying to see what I've got Oklahoma going 7-5. So
yeah. So I kind of talked a little bit about this earlier, but I don't like backing teams with bad offensive lines. And Oklahoma was horrible on the offensive line last year. I don't see it getting a whole lot better. Yeah, they got Mateer out of the portal. They got his OC, but you can't hide bad offensive line play in the SEC.
If they can't block, it's gonna show in that Michigan game in the worst way, because Michigan's always tough up front defensively.
So you kind of set up the perfect segue there talking about Michigan, because there's a very pivotal game that Michigan plays fairly early in the year against USC. I've got USC winning that game, and I've got USC in the college football playoff. This was the Big Ten team that I was teasing earlier that I'm very high on. So basically, you look at last year, they led in the fourth quarter of every game except for the Notre Dame game, which they were – 10 yards away from
knocking
tying
on the door of tying.
Yeah,
with about
before they
7
threw
minutes
2
to
pick
go.
sixes. So basically, this is a team that was very close last year, but I think the reason why they lost so many of those close games, they were not yet built to play in the Big Ten. They didn't have a whole lot of depth on the interior defensively. They weren't the best defensively, and they went out in the portal and they added some guys. They got some depth pieces. They recruited well. I just see this team being more built for the Big Ten schedule. I think they can very easily go 10-2 or 11-1 with their schedule, and I have them getting into the college football playoff. Also, did learn this doing my research, Dad. USC has a player on their roster that we both coached against. Do you know who it is?
Oh, I saw this recently. Jamal Jarrett from Grimsley.
Correct. Jamal Jarrett of Grimsley in Greensboro, North Carolina. He went to Georgia. Huge recruit, huge kid. And he is now at USC. He was not getting a whole lot of playing time at Georgia. So USC, like I said, they're adding these SEC bodies. They're getting more equipped to defend and last in the Big Ten. I really think that they got something brewing there. And so I've got them in the college football playoff.
They've got a schedule with a lot of again, just like last year, a lot of one-possession games at Illinois, Michigan at home, at Nebraska, Iowa at home, and even at Oregon. You know, those games could go either way. And I mean, if they end up on the right side of enough of them, I think 10-2 would certainly get them.
And I'll be honest too, I like Mayava at quarterback better than I like Miller Moss. I think that's an improvement. So, if they'd been starting Mayava the whole season last year, they might have won some of those games.
Yeah.
So now we both have one more wild card on the bracket, and then we both have our G5 team. So talk about your wild card team, the Ole Miss Rebels.
Okay, I've got Ole Miss. I've got them going 10-2. When I looked at their schedule, it looked like they were going to be possibly favored in every game except the Georgia game.
Correct. I'm with you on that.
They were a very good team metrics wise last year. The Florida game just killed them.
Yes, if
I mean,
they
they were a
didn't,
lock to get in. They were a lock to get in. Maybe even get a maybe as high as an 8 seed.
that game was so dumb. Like just
Yeah,
the decisions that Lane Kiffin was making, the decisions that Jackson Dart was making, like it just they did things in that game that just baffled me. And if they just closed
yeah,
that game out, they are in the college football playoff. Like they would have gotten in over SMU, in my opinion, if they had just been at 10-2 instead of 9-3. So
yeah,
I get it.
yeah. And I mean, yeah, like I said, that schedule. I'm just not seeing a. I don't see. Florida's going to be a tight spread, but they're at home. I think they're better than. I think they're a lot better than Oklahoma.
I agree.
They've got South Carolina at home. Uh,
That's kind of the pivotal game.
Austin Simmons showed a lot of promise in that Georgia. That one
Yes.
drive he had against Georgia. I just, when I looked at him, I'm like, gosh, this is, favorable schedule, good quarterback, some players coming back. They've recruited well in the portal. It could be Lane's year.
Yes. So literally, it came down to me to that South Carolina Ole Miss game, and I have South Carolina winning, and that's why they're in my bracket, and why Ole Miss is not. Like, I just like it's. You don't know it at the time usually, but you're going to look back after the season and be like, oh, if this game had turned out different. Like there's games that determine who's in the college football playoff. You just don't always know it while it's happening.
Oh, yeah.
So my wild card team, we talked about them already. I have got Georgia Tech in the playoff. I think when you look at it, if they go 10-3, hear me out, where they lose to Clemson, Georgia, Clemson again, I think that gets them in. I think that the committee showed last year they don't want to punish somebody for losing in the conference championship game. So I think that if Georgia Tech gets to 10-2 after losing to Georgia, then I think that they're going to be in, even if they do get beat by Clemson in the ACC championship.
They may be underdogs in a couple of games, but not other than Clemson and Georgia, but not dramatically. I think I had them as a 2-point dog at Duke and slight underdog at home against Pitt. But that when I look at that may have been a miscalculation. Well, yeah, Pitt, I mean it's certainly possible if Haynes King stays healthy. I mean they gave Georgia all they could handle last year. They should have won. They should have won that game.
Absolutely. And I'm so thankful that they changed the rule on overtime timeouts. So that way if that does happen again, we don't have to watch Kirby Smart sprinting up the sideline to call timeout every single overtime.
That was unwatchable.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, we both have our G5 team as is mandated by the CFP rules. You have Boise State as your G5 team. So make the case for the Broncos.
I think they're the best in the G5, probably by a touchdown maybe over anybody else. I mean they're a P5 team playing. They're a P5 team with P5 resources playing in a upper tier G5 conference. They're probably gonna lose at Notre Dame. But they may give them a very good. They may give a very. I look for them to give a very good accounting of themselves in that game, I think they'll probably end up 10-2 somewhere in that neighborhood,
and that'll get them in.
Somebody else is just going to have to run. One of these other teams from a lesser conference is just going to have to run the table to bump them out of that spot.
Well, I'm glad you said that because I have got Toledo going 12-0 and making the college football playoff. Now, I've got two theories that they're totally unfounded, purely reckless speculation. But just go with me here with this one, Dad. So I think that a big reason why Boise got in last year was because of how well they showed up in their P4 game against Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that they showed that they can play against Oregon and not embarrass themselves went a long way for the committee in wanting to put them in. Now, granted, it did help that they ran the table after that and went 11-1. I also think that, again, totally unfounded, purely reckless speculation, I also think that the committee is going to look to reward as many different conferences and as many different teams as possible with this bid. I don't think they're going to want to just put in the same team every year. I think they're going to want to be democratic about it. Again, totally unfounded, purely speculation, but that's just how I see it. And so I think how that pertains to this year is if Boise State does not play well against Notre Dame, which is a possibility, I think Notre Dame is going to be vastly superior on the lines than they are. And if Boise State stubs their toe at some point throughout the rest of the season and goes 10-2 with a bad loss at Notre Dame, I think that really opens the door for another G5 team to get in. I've got it being Toledo. Toledo's P4 opponent this year on their schedule is Kentucky. Now, granted, I don't think Kentucky's any good, but if they go out and beat Kentucky and then proceed to run the table, I think that would go a long way in getting the committee to put them in. And I do think that, like you said, I agree with this part. It would take somebody running the table for it to not be a 10-2 or 11-1 Mountain West champ Boise.
Yeah.
So the team that I think can do that is Toledo.
Yeah, and you could see an 11-1. You could see an 11-1 American team do the same thing.
Also true.
The problem, Navy runs the table against everybody but Notre Dame.
Now
that's a possibility, but
boy, would that make the Army-Navy game interesting if Navy got to that with college football playoff implications on the line. Now, granted, also, I think the problem with the American is they've got like 5 teams at the top that are all about even. And I think the same thing about the Sun Belt. I think that the teams at the top are all about even. They're going to beat each other up. And what you need to be the G5 team that gets in the CFP, you really need 12-0 or 11-1.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why I think if it's not Boise, then that's why I'm saying it's going to be Toledo.
Yeah.
Boy, and that would make Maction something interesting if Toledo gets to 10-0 and they got to go to a snowy Ypsilanti in the middle of November. I don't even know if Eastern Michigan's on their schedule. I just want to say Ypsilanti. Anyway, so before we go, Dad, got to pick a champion. I will start because you probably know exactly where this is going. I have got Texas as my team winning the college football playoff this year. I just think that everything in Sark's time in Austin has been building towards this year. The Arch Manning era has begun. They've got a loaded roster. They're going to test themselves with their schedule in the regular season and be prepared for the CFP. And as long as we can make it to the CFP and not call a toss on 2nd and goal with the 1, I think we're going to be okay. And I really think Texas is going to win the college football playoff. If you are a true college football fan, you probably know exactly the play that I was just talking about. Anyway, who you got, Dad?
I've got Notre Dame. Like you, I'm being a homer. That's full disclosure. That's my team. I just think that they gained so much from the run last year, and they're just so deep. They play like 10 defensive linemen last year. They rotate 10 defensive linemen in, and they rotate 5 linebackers, and they've just got dudes to fill any position that they're missing. Same thing on the O-line. So, it's like there's not a guy starting that's going to be green on that team this year.
Right.
Granted, they lost a couple of really good defenders in Kaiser and Watts, but I think the backfills are pretty strong. And, I think by the end of the year, whoever wins that quarterback battle, Minchie or Carr, I think whoever it is going to, by the time the playoff comes around, they'll be a little more versatile than Riley Leonard was.
Right.
And their passing game will be more open, and they've got an excellent receiving core this year.
Yes, I was going to say that.
Greathouse came into his own at the end of the season. Faison came into his own at the end of the season. They've added, Malachi Fields from Virginia and Will Pauling from Wisconsin. So I just feel like they're going to be peaking at the right time, and they know how to manage that. They know how to manage that run, that late season run, and
right.
I just feel good about their chances.
Yeah. So when the college football playoff last year, when we got the 12 teams, when it started, they were my pick to win in my bracket, and I was about this close to getting that right. The one thing that impresses me the most about them is, and this is one thing that, Nick Saban coached at Alabama for 14 years or something like that. he kind of gave everybody the blueprint of how to build a dynasty in college football. And that is, you want to stockpile NFL talent at all positions all the time. And so that way, when you have an injury or when a guy graduates or when a guy transfers, the guy that's replacing him is just another 5-star that's going to play on Sundays, right? Notre Dame, in addition to Georgia and Texas and Ohio State, I would say, they have that stockpile of talent now. And, in the Brian Kelly era, when they would play in these New Year's Six games or the college football playoff games and they would get beaten, they didn't have that stockpile of talent. Now that Marcus Freeman is there, that roster is every bit as talented as a Georgia or a Texas or an Ohio State. And I think that Notre Dame, with the schedule they play, is a very likely candidate to get in the CFP. And once they're in the CFP, like you said, they have the experience now from last year. They're going to know what to do once they get there. And I really do like that as a pick. Now, I'm going to challenge you a little bit, though, Dad. We got to take the homer caps off for just a second. If not Notre Dame, then who?
That's a good question. If it weren't for James Franklin's history of not winning big games, I would say Penn State.
Yeah.
But given that, I tend to say Georgia because of Kirby Smart's success and the fact that they've got that same type of talent stockpile that you mentioned with Alabama and Texas, and Ohio State. It's wide open though. Mike, I could probably say 7 or 8 of these teams could win it.
And especially with all these teams that are working in new quarterbacks or new coordinators, like it's definitely more open this year than it's ever felt.
Yeah.
In my opinion. Also, one thing I will say that I forgot to mention this earlier. When you go back and look at last year's college football playoff bracket, like it's easy to look at it in hindsight and be like, oh, well, Indiana, yeah, they were good. SMU, yeah, they were good, right? But at the start of the season, if you would have told anybody that you were picking SMU or Indiana to make the college football playoff, they would have thought you were crazy.
Yeah.
So there's going to be some teams that get in here that are going to surprise us, that are going to be shocking. And so that's why I'm glad that both of us kind of went a little bit outside the box with a USC and a Florida and a Georgia Tech and a Michigan, right? So like, I'm glad that we both did that, because if you just go in the AP poll and pick the top 11 and then insert, a G5 team like Boise, like that's not going to be what happens, especially in a year like this year.
Yeah, I agree.
So anyway, that is going to carry us to the end. Dad, thank you for joining me for this College Football 2025 season preview. I know, like me, you are very excited for the season to start. Great analysis. Cannot stress enough that how glad I was to have you join me on this as somebody who knows ball, and I really appreciate you coming on.
Always a pleasure.
So before we go for good, I do want to mention while you're here, if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, please subscribe already. We just surpassed 1,000 subscribers, which is a huge milestone for us, and I really do appreciate it. We're going to have weekly shows talking daily fantasy, bets, player props, all that stuff for college football. So you're going to want to make sure you're subscribed so that way you can be with us for that. And before the season starts, we're going to have more content coming your way talking about best ball drafts on Underdog, which you guys, if you're watching this, you should probably be pretty interested in. If you're interested in college football, learn some of the players, start playing some college fantasy football, because it's a lot of fun and I really do enjoy it. Dad, I would love to get you in a best ball draft one of these days if I could explain it to you.
Okay, let's do it.
All right, but that is going to end it for today. Again, Dad, thank you for joining me. Everybody out there watching, thank you for watching and listening to this point. I hope that this helped get you guys excited about this college football season as we are. So thank you guys for watching and listening, and we'll see you guys next time.